With less than half of speaking roles going to women, and many of those roles being thinly characterized, it's evident that representation is lacking. This prompts the question, is there progress being made in Hollywood's depiction of women? I don't think so. Not a lot. Not enough. And not fast enough.
Yeah.
Welcome to The Scariest, brought to you by Raise Her Co. I'm Sky.
And I'm Talitha. We are proudly broadcasting from Treaty 4 territory, as always. And in each episode, we tackle the alarming, inconceivable, questionable, shocking, and scary statistics relating to, impacting, and intervening with the lives of women and girls worldwide.
You'll hear the scary truth, take away tools and tips, and learn what you can do about it. And The Scaries is really a place to use our voices as women and supporters of women to make real change. So, as always, this is for entertainment purposes only. These are our own opinions. And remember that we will be sharing some statistics that could be triggering, so listen with caution.
As straight, cisgender, white, able-bodied settler women, we are very aware of our privilege, and we want to use this platform to spread awareness about the scary reality that women face from around the world in different life situations.
And why?
Because sometimes nothing is scarier than being a woman.
Hello, Scaries fam. Welcome back to another episode of The Scaries. We have a very eye-opening, but fun and upbeat, I would say still, episode for you today. Coming in hot right off of the awards season. And awards, I mean the film awards, the music awards, all the awards. It seems like all we hear, all we talk about in the media, honestly, for the past months. I feel like since Barbie came out, it's all we hear. The world is all about movies, actors, the box office, what's happening, who or what, who offended who. List goes on. And we know really that the media has served as the cornerstone of societal transformation, reflecting and shaping particular times' political, social, and cultural norms. It has a huge impact, whether or not we want to believe it. And this characteristic makes it an effective tool for sharing messages to the wide audience. That's why those TV ads are big dollars.
Oh, yeah.
So while traditional media like newspapers and TV and radio and posters really lead the discussions on these issues, and social progress, the film industry is sometimes overlooked in its contribution. It's not just entertainment. It really does have an impact on the societal shifts and the trends and what's being said and what we think.
Very much so. Movies can influence sharing ideas about love, religion, family, and society at large. They can bring together people, but they can also reinforce stereotypes that exclude some groups. When we examine the film industry through social theories, it shows how women are often actually unfairly represented on screen and off screen, and why this happens. The film industry, particularly in the realm of top grossing theatrical releases, has historically been dominated by men behind the scenes, a trend that persists today. In 2023, only 18% of the 100 top grossing films featured more female than male characters, and 5% of films had equal numbers of female and male characters.
What? Only 5%?
Yep.
How?
So if we're going to do the math here, this meant that a whopping 77% of movies had more male than female characters in speaking.
Last year.
Yeah.
What the heck?
Yeah, in speaking roles. So like, I mean, there might be like a bunch of women like in the background, but speaking roles specifically, they actually have something to say. This underrepresentation of women behind the scenes inevitably impacts their on-screen portrayal. Sadly, female roles in movies often fall into limited, repetitive tropes and character archetypes compared to their male counterparts.
I mean, we know that women were, and still often, as we can see, are confined to these domestic roles with limited access to education and job opportunities. They're often excluded from public life. They've lacked voting rights as recently as 1960 for Indigenous women in Canada, which is nuts.
Yeah.
And over time, historical, political, and social advancements led to the rise of feminism.
Yay, feminism.
Yes, which empowered women and challenged male dominance. But despite that progress of the 20th century, women still continue, as we see, to fight for representation in the media and basically everywhere else. So before the Motion Picture Production Code, or also known as the Hays Code, came into effect in 1930, women in early Hollywood had more freedom, interestingly, in both on and off the screen than we might expect. They tackled taboo topics like abortion and birth control, and even had storylines where they ran the world.
Wow.
In the early
Could you
1900s.
imagine?
Yeah. In 1924 is The Last Man on Earth. Women ruled the planet. I got to check that show out.
Yeah, sounds amazing.
I mean, this is because all the men disappeared, but still, like, very cool.
Still.
I don't think I've ever seen a movie since like that. So
No.
it wasn't quite the paradise of Wonder Woman's world, but it was a bold concept for the time specifically. And this freedom was partly because women were a significant part of the movie audience. And I would be interesting to see those stats of who makes up the movie audience today. But back then it was a lot of women. They made up over 80% of viewers in the 20s.
That's actually really wild. I mean, I guess because they weren't allowed to work. I don't know. Like, so they're just going to the movies instead. Honestly, that sounds actually incredible. But
makes sense. But also, 80% of the viewers in the 20s and continued into the 30s and 40s. Filmmakers catered to what these women wanted to see, which often included strong female characters leading revolutions and going on daring adventures. Interesting.
Love
but
that
they knew women wanted to see that.
Yeah. Going on daring adventures.
But yeah, the rest of the world was like not considering those things.
No.
Interesting.
Classic.
This cinematic liberation mirrored what was happening in society at large. In the early 20th century, women fought for change, from suffrage to contraception rights. Although they weren't yet holding that high political office, they were laying the groundwork for future progress. However, in this era of freedom, it ended with the rise of conservatism in the US, particularly in Hollywood. This led to stricter regulations and a shift away from the bold storytelling of the early 1900s.
Oh, the fen never lasts for us, does it?
Never.
So it's no secret that Barbie, I know we have not stopped talking about Barbie, and we probably won't stop talking about her, but it's no secret that Barbie had a significant cultural presence in 2023, which created an illusion of increased female character representation in films that year. But women are still dramatically underrepresented in front of and behind the camera in Hollywood. We're going to reference a few different but associated reports for our stats and research today. The first and second are from USC's Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, which I know that we've mentioned before in our music episode. And that the first report is called Inclusion in the Director's Chair, and the second one is Inequality in 1,600 Popular Films. They looked at 1,600 films. Anyways, the third report is It's a Man's Celluloid World from the Center for the Study of Women in Television and Film at San Diego State University. These reports show that despite some successful films and directors, Hollywood still has a big problem with diversity. And of course, we'll link them in the show notes so you can peruse them for yourself. So starting in front of the camera, according to the most recent It's a Man's Celluloid World by Dr. Martha Lausen, who is the executive director of the Center for the Study of Women in Television and Film at San Diego State University, revealed a decline in the percentage of women in speaking roles from 37% in 2022 to 35% in 2023, including just a 0.1% transgender characters. Moreover, the proportion of films featuring sole female protagonists decreased from 33% to 28%, falling below the peak of 40% observed in 2019.
Declining. What the heck?
Yeah, no, we just continuously going down. I feel like we've seen something about 2019 that like there was an increase. I think it was in the music episode. Now I can't remember, but things were like at an all-time high in 2019.
Yeah.
And now since everything has just gone back down.
2022, I think specifically for the movies and films, it was like a good year for women to be represented, and just last year we just missed the mark.
Went down again.
But I think age has a lot to do with when we think about women who are represented. Yeah. Well, how old are they?
Yeah.
And so if we dig into that, female characters tend to be younger. Shocker. mostly in their 20s and 30s, compared to their male counterparts who are more likely in their 30s and 40s. The study found a sharp decline in the percentage of female characters from their 30s, which is 30%, to their 40s, which is only 13%, while male characters saw a decrease only in their 50s. So in this study, Dr. Martha pointed out the significant decrease in the population of female characters around the age of 40 as they get older. Despite notable performances by actresses like Jane Fonda and Diane Keaton and Rita Moreno in films like 80 for Brady and Book Club, The Next Chapter, roles,
Book Club.
So good. I love that show. Roles for actresses over 60 remained very scarce. This age group represented only 7% of females in the top grossing films in 2023. well below the proportion in the US population. Dr. Martha also emphasized that limiting the portrayal of older female characters also limits their potential to depict personal, political, and professional empowerment as they age. Yeah, it's like women don't just go away when they A, get pregnant and have a family, and B, when they age and
turn 40 and
their
just
children
disappear.
are older. It's like, what are they doing?
I think we talk so much about representation, and I think really often in like these types of things, it's forgotten about, like women who are, I would say, of a certain age. Because even thinking about like movies like Book Club, which is why I love it so much, it shows women just like being women, and regardless of the age they are, it's like women like sex, women like to have wine, women like to like go out and party sometimes, you know, like whatever it may be. It's not that like, you turn 40 or you turn 50 or you turn 70 and you're like, no, now you just must knit at home and like bake and Well,
and I think it's so interesting too when you think about the quintessential or the stereotypical leader, you know, the Wall Street guy or the lawyer. It's always like an old white man. But you're not seeing those leader roles, and we're seeing more female, like, you know, executive roles, but they're still very youthful. Like the only one I can think of is The Devil Wears Prada. Where she's a little bit she has gray hair. You know what I mean? Where she's like an older.
She's even actually considered like a movie trope where she's like hard, kind of like asexual, like,
and of course
is a bitch
into a certain thing.
Like it's not just like I'm just a successful person. It's like no, she's like obviously has some mental health issues.
Years ago. Can you believe it?
No,
it was the 20-year anniversary of Devil Wears Prada, like this year, I think, because it just came on Netflix as like a reminder. It's a 20-year anniversary.
My god,
it's like one of my favorite movies of all time.
But we're only 10.
But back 20 years ago when it was like early 2000s. It was like crazy to see a woman who's that age in that role. Of course, she's always going to be a bitch. And when we think about this, I can go on about this for days, but think about Disney movies. Who's the villain? It's always a woman,
and always an old lady woman.
Always a woman, and this evil stepmother. The Maleficent, the Yzma, like it's always a woman, and it's always to this princess who doesn't have a mom, only a dad. And like, what is this about?
And they're mad at her because the princess is youthful. Like that's why they're like, we hate her because
competitive thing that we've been painting into our culture forever. Anyway, we go on forever, but so many issues we need to get over and move the dial on. But deeper into this report, the inequality in 1600 popular films shared similar casualties for women. Despite the massive box office success of Barbie, which we all know grossed $1.4 billion.
Insane.
The study authors emphasized that Barbie's success isn't enough for optimism. Unfortunately, one film can't represent progress for the whole industry, even though I think it was like the cast was like a very high percentage of females or like at least an equal mix. This year's study results show an industry that seems indifferent to diversity and inclusion efforts. Very sad.
Very, very true. So moving behind the camera, even though Greta Gerwig's Barbie was the highest grossing film in 2023, women are still not getting enough opportunities to direct in Hollywood, which is where the next Annenberg report, Inclusion in the Director's Chair, comes in. So in 2023, a total of 116 directors were attached to the top 100 grossing films, domestic films. Domestic, I think, is considered technically US, but like I think North America is an overall kind of picture of that. 14 or 12.1% were women, and 102 or 80% were men. This is a gender ratio of 7.3 males to every one female hired. So even though films directed by women did very well in 2023, as we know, there hasn't been a very big change overall. Women still only make up 22% of all directors, writers, producers, and other important roles in the top grossing films. In fact, in over 15 years, the percentage of women in top directing roles hasn't even increased by 10 points.
What the heck?
Yeah. The situation is not much better for diversity in general. Even though studios promised to be more diverse after the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, they still aren't making many films by people of color. The number of directors from underrepresented groups hasn't really changed from 2022 to 2023, and only a small percentage of women directors are women of color. Additionally, the number of films led by women of color decreased from 18 to 14. While this is an improvement from the study's origin in 2007, where there was only one, it still indicates significant underrepresentation.
Well, we're both mamas and our kids consume media like it's going out of style. Unfortunately, that's just the way of this generation coming up.
Yeah.
And so we thought it'd be interesting to include some information about children's shows. We kind of touched on it a little bit in these Disney movies.
Yeah.
But when we drill into it, nearly half of the human characters in TV shows targeted at older children are women, but the representation of female characters diminishes significantly when we consider non-human characters, so the animals, which constitute the majority of children's TV due to the prevalence of animation. So only 32% of animal characters are female. 32%, bringing the overall percentage of female characters, including both human and non-human, to 35%, which is similar to the stat about women in film, just in general. These female characters, human and non-human, often fall into stereotypical roles, of course, with girls frequently depicted as blonde team members or pink or purple, rather than the leaders of the show or the pack. And their appearance often dictates their personality traits on the show. Interesting.
Very much so.
While the representation of positively portrayed females characters in children's TV is improving, the situation changes as children grow older. Teenage girls are more likely to encounter sexualized portrayals of female characters in media and witness unfair treatment on social media and see unrealistic body images. Oh, just what they mean, hey?
Exactly.
Female characters in film are often sexualized with the script stage, with the descriptions emphasizing physical attractiveness over their qualities. And I would say, like, even at a younger age now, we're seeing more sexualized. Girls are more aware of media's influence on them compared to boys as well, with a significant percentage considering themselves highly influenced by TV and movies in the terms of their appearance. I believe it.
I absolutely believe it. Just thinking back to like some of the TV shows that I know our kids both consume and some of the newer ones. So like there's the ones that have been around for a while, but some of the newer ones, like I know I've touted how much I love the show, but Bluey.
Oh, I love
Bluey is absolutely incredible. And for the longest time, I mean, I didn't sit down and watch it for, long periods of time, but like I didn't know which gender, if Bluey was gendered at all, for a really long time, because it's just like she is a girl. They say that, but like
she's blue,
but she's blue and like loves like sports and loves and going on adventures and like all of these things. So like they never really gendered her in one way or the other, and her sister Bingo. And I think that that's just such an important lesson, and like that's where animation and shows should be going. Is that it's like kids are just kids. Let them just
whatever.
And love them. Anyways, we covered the physical presence of women in front of and behind the camera, but what about how they're portrayed? In this modern day and age, the world finally seems to be starting to understand that female stereotypes are offensive and not really entertaining. But not everyone in Hollywood.
Slowly but surely are we getting there? I don't know.
Not everyone in Hollywood has gotten the memo yet, but it's coming.
Not anyone anywhere has gotten the memo.
No.
I'd say.
Yeah. For years, women have been misrepresented while white men are disproportionately portrayed and are often underrepresented as leading characters in films. Despite the longstanding portrayal of women in film confined to narrow categories, such as man-stealers, like Julia Roberts' character in My Best Friend's Wedding, damsels in distress, like Whitney Houston in The Bodyguard, or even the cool girl, like Kate Hudson's basketball-obsessed How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days character, or Rosamund Pike's Amy Dunn in Gone Girl. And we even talked about the other one with like that kind of like asexual, hard bitch type that is in Devil Wears Prada. Yeah. But I actually think this cool girl portrayal is one of the most interesting for me. I think especially for like folks who are in their kind of 20s, 30s, dating, that sort of thing. Amy Dunn, the character in Gone Girl, has this full monologue that really breaks down this wild kind of quote unquote perfect woman that is seen too often when men write and or direct women in films and television. So I want to read the monologue just because I think it's like really interesting, and then we can chat about it. So the monologue that she says in full is, "Men always say that as a defining compliment, don't they? She's a cool girl. Being the cool girl means I am hot, brilliant, funny woman who adores football, poker, dirty jokes, and burping, who plays video games, drinks cheap beer, loves threesomes and anal sex, and jams hot dogs and hamburgers into her mouth while she's hosting the world's biggest culinary gangbang, while somehow maintaining a size 2, because cool girls are above all hot and understanding. Cool girls never get angry. They only smile in a chagrined, loving manner and let their men do whatever they want. Go ahead, shit on me. I don't mind. I'm the cool girl."
Ooh. To me, it's like this is the idealized version of what not all men, but a lot of men would consider like the perfect woman, right? Basically a man, but in inside and
Oh,
a female
100%.
on the outside.
100%. And like, I know even when I was like in my, you know, early 20s and like trying to find myself and all of that, I absolutely like tried to take on some of these characteristics of like, oh no, like I'm totally cool if like we do all this stuff, and you try to like change yourself for who you are to attract men, and it doesn't help when they are portrayed in this way. I mean, I know Amy Dunn in Gone Girl is like a little bit of a different character, but like, and I mean, I know that we're just talking about movies that are from more of our generation, but like Kate Hudson and How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, like she was like ultimate, like so cool, bang and bod, loved like all of these things, and like that's like what you looked up to be. But like that's, I mean, it is realistic for some women, but not all women are like that. Like not all women love doing those things.
Totally. And then I love that movie, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Because as soon as a lot of her How to Lose the Guy were when she was more the female, like taking him to Celine Dion concert and like getting a dog and like making their pictures together of like their babies and calling his mom. Like those are all more feminine, typical, stereotypical like female things. Those are, and like not necessarily her personality type of the movie. And those are the things that turned him off.
Yeah.
Well, many of these roles revolve around impacting other characters rather than showing their own thoughts or development. They serve to complicate the hero's journey and offer emotional support or provide motivation. With less than half of speaking roles going to women, and many of those roles being thinly characterized, it's evident that representation is lacking. This prompts the question: is there progress being made in Hollywood's depiction of women? I don't think so. Not a lot. Not enough. And not fast enough. Like, and we're going backwards like this past year from earlier. So what the heck? So there has been some progress. Yes, there always is, hopefully, with some of these stereotypes being challenged on screen. The prevalence of empowered female characters who defy these stereotypes is increasing. And despite arguments dismissing the impact of these depictions, movies and TV play a significant role in shaping societal perceptions. They do. We can't ignore that. And perpetuating stereotypes that can have harmful real-world consequences. So there's two social theories out there, the social cognitive theory and the cultivation theory. And these two theories offer insights into how audience receive gender representation in film. So the social cognitive theory suggests that media consumption shapes people's perceptions of the world. The cultivation theory or cultivation analysis focuses on the effects of long-term television viewing on an individual's perception of the world around them. So, for example, watching romantic films can influence how individuals view relationships. Media content can also impact a person's understanding of reward and punishment in different situations. So, whether we believe it or not, movies play a huge role in what you think is right or wrong, what your ideals are, what your, you know, what you think is should be happening, especially in things that you haven't even gone through yet, like if you're a young person, relationships and things like that. So,
oh my God. Okay. So even looking back and like when I watched To All the Boys I Loved Before with my husband, and then like moving around our house in the few days after that. And I was like, how come you don't like write me notes? And like, how come you aren't like putting your finger in my back pocket? And he was like, Talitha, like, calm down. This is just a movie. This is not real life. But I was like, so I absolutely see how it can shape people's
and think
lives.
about fairy tales, right? Like, it's always like this is, and a lot of fairy tales and movies of the past, like Disney movies, where the woman was just all she wanted to do was get married and have a family and find her Prince Charming.
We're like conditioned.
Whereas now we're seeing more fairy tales or Disney movies with a female lead. It's not about finding a husband. It's like Frozen and those things. It's like, oh, we're just gonna
save the world,
which is great. But anyway, interesting.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So after watching numerous movies, you obviously can't help but notice the reoccurring character types. While stereotypical portrayals aren't exclusive to female characters, they often do face particularly limiting roles, evident when examining those on-screen representation statistics. A broad perspective is helpful in understanding the evolutions of women's representation. A study from the National University of Singapore analyzed Hollywood movie plots from 1940 to 2019, revealing that while female characters' roles have evolved somewhat, they often remain confined to supporting roles. For instance, while the portrayal of women as wives or widows decreased over time, the use of girlfriend and crush remained consistent, emphasizing their roles as love interests. However, There's a promising trend in the decreasing emphasis on physical beauty as a defining trait, thank goodness, suggesting a shift towards granting women more agency on screen, challenging traditional gender stereotypes. Despite some progress, women are still depicted as over-emotional, powerless, and confined to traditional roles in films. Even movies targeting female audiences often perpetuate these stereotypes. The male-dominated nature of the film industry contributes to the unequal representation, with fewer opportunities for female directors and producers. While the industry has begun to challenge gender stereotypes and offer more diverse representations, there still is work to be done. Female filmmakers provide a crucial role in providing unbiased and realistic portrayals of women, and efforts to provide them with equal opportunities are essential for promoting fair representation in film. But how can we assess representation?
Great question. It's the quintessential age-old question. So there are a couple different tests that folks have created to review and assess representation in screenplays and movies. And so let's share those with you.
Right. I think because, like, you know, Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg are listening to this podcast.
Yes.
So,
hey, Martin.
Yeah. Hey, Steven. So keep those ears open, fellas, because we have some tests that you can run on your scripts.
Mm-hmm. So the first is the Bechdel test, and we mentioned this one in a previous episode. So the Bechdel test first appeared in 1985, and it was appeared in a comic strip of the dykes to watch out for. And it entered the critical conversation decades later as a barometer for considering gender representation in media. So in addition to film, the test can be applied to video games, TV shows, plays, and literature.
Great.
These are the 3 rules that the movies need to have to be considered and listed in the test. The movie must have at least 2 women in it. The women must talk to each other, and their discussion must be about something other than men. Interesting. So critics have reviewed and updated the Bechdel test to suggest that female characters should be named or say more than 5 words to each other and share more than a minute of screen time. Still, the 3 original rules are commonly used to test gender representation. So that's
so interesting.
That's one test, and you can Google the Bechdel test and see, like, get the website to see what movies
There's like a lot of, also, we can put it in the show notes. There's a lot of movies that you would think would pass the test, or you would think that would fail the test, and they're like actually a little bit opposite. So when they added those kind of extra characteristics, it like changed the pass,
so it rates
fail.
Like all the movies, and as like red, green, or yellow is like kind of getting there, hits all the marks, or doesn't. The second test is the Duvernay test. I don't know how to say that word perfectly, but this test evaluates the representation of people of color in the media and gauges whether Black and other minorities have fully realized lives rather than serving as part of the scenery in white stories. Interesting. It also seeks to encourage screenwriters and filmmakers to include complex people of color characters with their own plot lines, fully developed persons, and narrative significance in movies. And then the next one is the Vito Russo test. So this was developed by GLAAD, GLAAD. So they developed Vito Russo test, and it's named after the film historian and GLAAD co-founder Vito Russo. It addresses LGBTQ plus representation. For a production to pass this test, these are the criteria. First, there has to be at least one character who identifies as bisexual, lesbian, gay, or trans. Second, the character cannot be solely defined by their sexuality or gender identity. And thirdly, the character must be integral to the plot to the extent that if they were removed, it would have a huge impact on the story.
I feel like this one is really interesting because so often I feel like in women's, not directed, but like women's movies, there's like the gay BFF who but
that's just all they're just the fun gay friend.
Yeah, exactly.
To their story. I would love to see a test that layers all of these tests.
Yeah.
Let's look at the women. Let's look at women of color, and then LGBTQ plus, all of those intersectionalities, and then see how many movies we're left with.
Oh my God, I know
like
there'll be 1 or 2 for sure.
So the Vito Russo test really highlights the importance of including fully realized consequential LGBTQ plus characters in their films.
Yeah. The second last test, and I think it's the most hilarious, is the sexy lamp test.
Sexy lamp test?
Yeah, it's the best. So this comically named test is a thought experiment created by comic book and TV writer Kelly Sue DeConnick. According to her, and this is the really important part, if you can remove a female character from your plot and replace her with a sexy lamp and your story still works, you're a hack.
What?
So these characters are not intrinsic to the narrative, meaning they could easily be removed without making an impact. So there are quite a few movies that do not pass the sexy lamp test.
Wow.
So last is the Mako-Mori test. This test can be seen as the spiritual successor to the Bechdel test and a more rigorous take on the sexy lamp test. So it kind of combines the two. Named after the character Mako-Mori from Pacific Rim, which was a movie in 2013, this test was developed in reaction to the film not passing the Bechdel test, despite Mako-Mori being a complex female character. So for a piece of media to pass this Mako-Mori test, it must include one or more female characters. These characters must have their own story arcs, and the story arc shouldn't exist to support the male character's story arc.
I think I like those criteria better than the Bechdel test. It's more about like the actual storyline versus like, are they there and are they talking?
Are they talking about boys?
Yes, yeah.
This test definitely prioritizes the development of female characters in a qualitative rather than quantitative manner. So like there's quality of what she's saying versus just all of that. Anyways.
So the question always remains, how do we create change? How do we move the dial forward in this area? Well, one of the most impactful ways to create better role opportunities for women is also one of the most direct. Creating more gender equality behind the camera could have a major impact on female representation in film. Really?
Weird.
So a study by our gal, Dr. Martha, another study by her, the Celluloid Ceiling Employment of Behind the Scenes Women on Top Grossing Films in 2022, revealed that in movies with at least one female director or writer, women made up 56% of the protagonists. Among the movies exclusively written and directed by men, that number fell to 23%. Major characters were 45% female in movies with at least one woman writing or directing. In movies with men in those creative roles, only 36% of major characters were women. So there's goes to show if women are at the helm, directing, leading, it's more likely to see more women, which no surprise there.
Absolutely.
So what's ahead? Well, the highest grossing U.S. film of 2024 so far is Mean Girls, which I haven't seen yet.
I actually haven't seen it either, but I listened to all the music and I love it.
So this features a predominantly female cast. And when we look ahead, notable box office releases led by women include Godzilla and Kong, The New Empire with Rebecca Hall, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga with Anya Taylor-Joy, A Quiet Place, Day One with Lupita Nyong'o, and Wicked with Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo.
I'm so excited for
Wicked. There's some really cool ones coming up. Yeah. So to fully realize their potential societal roles, women must not be confined with the confines of male-centric narratives. Media stands as a crucial agent in empowering women, promoting awareness of their capabilities, and challenging male stereotypes and patriarchy and dominance, and driving further societal transformation.
Absolutely. Focusing on addressing the representation gap in film is important for striving towards a fairer future, but there are also more direct methods to promote progress. Initiatives like scholarships and professional mentorship programs, are actively encouraging women to pursue roles in behind-the-scenes filmmaking. Empowering these women to contribute to the creative direction of films can significantly impact the authenticity of future movie portrayals. Breaking free from stereotypes and tropes that have constrained the agency of female characters and actors requires collective action across the industry, and the time to initiate these changes is now. Thank you for joining us today as we confronted these maybe not so terrifying, but very real statistics impacting women and girls. Please share this episode, rate and subscribe wherever you are listening, and stay tuned for more ways to make a positive impact. Together, we can make the world a little less scary for women and girls.
And make sure to follow us on Instagram at RacerCo and at scaries.podcast and on TikTok at RacerCo. And remember that change starts with awareness and action. So, which is exactly what we're doing here today and with this podcast. Thank you for being a part of the Scaries community and making this world a little less scary to be a woman and a gal.
Bye.
Bye.